I have to warn you, the dark rules of power will probably get banned. Not because they're wrong, but because they're dangerous. They expose what the establishment wanted hidden for thousands of years, and they teach you how power really works outside the rules. And that kind of knowledge, it does not last long online. So if you're seeing this now, I want you to share it because they will not let you learn from them. This is for the ones who refuse to bow down and be ruled. And you're going to want to stay till the end of this video because I'm going to tell you why Rome's richest man, worth way more than Elon Musk, died the most horrible death imaginable. As a hint, it was much worse than crucifixion. So let's begin. Start off with me on this journey by imagining that you are Napoleon. It's December 1805, and freezing winds are sweeping across Austerlitz. You're outnumbered, and your generals are all whispering defeat. But you see opportunity, and so you order an attack so audacious that your enemies, they never saw it coming. That day, Napoleon didn't just win a singular battle, he reshaped history itself. So this begins dark rule of power number 1. Destiny is forged by decisive action. Fate will never reward your weak hesitation. It annihilates it. Never forget that opportunity is fleeting, even in your life. Julius Caesar once stood at the Rubicon's edge, knowing that once he crossed, there was no return. His life was on the line, but he didn't linger. With swift action, he defied Rome and seized power, thus transforming history forever. Opportunity demands speed and ruthless clarity. Let's go back to 1519 when Hernan Cortez landed on the shores of Mexico with only 600 men. That's not a lot. His soldiers looked back and they wanted to retreat. Cortez understood that hesitation would annihilate them all. So what did he do? He ordered his ships burned to ashes. That removed any possibility of escape, physically and mentally. Cortez forced his men into total commitment, victory or death. By destroying retreat, he transformed their mindset from hesitation to decisiveness. And within 2 years, Cortez conquered the mighty Aztec Empire. Imagine yourself there. Would you burn your ships or cling desperately to safety like a coward? Which describes the decisions you're making in your own life right now. Alexander the Great was in a similar predicament. He didn't conquer Persia in comfort. He left his Macedonian palaces. They were so lavish, marble. His beautiful mother was there. Everyone he knew was there, his childhood friends. But he left it all and marched through scorching deserts with his ragged and complaining army. His army complained incessantly, but he pressed on. Greatness demands you pay in sweat, blood, and personal sacrifice. Always remember that your mind is the true battlefield. Before physical battles, you're going to have to conquer your mental ones. The great strategist Sun Tzu taught this. He said victorious warriors, they win first, and then they go to war. You must envision victory clearly before it ever exists. Throughout history, every conqueror knew that destiny submits only to force of will. Whether it be Caesar, Alexander, Hannibal, Shaka Zulu, each one of them, they bent fate by sheer determination alone, even though they lived and fought in vastly different times. Destiny is like iron, and it must be heated and hammered with relentless, consistent blows. Bold action will always attract resistance, though. Society despises those who break its own rules. Think about it. Even in our modern era, nothing has changed for thousands of years. Jealousy, doubt, and betrayal are all guaranteed. Napoleon faced relentless betrayal, even from his closest allies, but he endured because resistance isn't a reason to stop. It's proof you're moving in the right direction. Because comfort is the enemy of greatness. Hesitation is the assassin of opportunity. And destiny doesn't knock, it demands you kick down the door and take what's rightfully yours. Now tell me, are you shaping your destiny, or has fate crushed your little dreams? Drop a comment below with one decisive action you will take today to alter your fate. And if you found value so far in this message, Share it with someone you know who needs a wake-up call. Remember, history doesn't honor the passive and weak. It celebrates those who are bold enough to write their destiny with their own relentless determination. Here's dark rule of power number 2. Control others through self-interest. You see, people rarely act from virtue alone. We all know that. Beneath every noble act and all self-righteousness and piety, hidden motives pulse quietly. It's fear and self-interest. When you master the art of using these twin forces and you wield unparalleled influence in the hearts and minds of men, you'll realize we're all controlled by these two levers. History makes it painfully clear the most effective leaders, whether celebrated or condemned, they knew exactly how to balance both fear and self-interest to command loyalty and obedience. After Julius Caesar's assassination, Augustus inherited a fractured and chaotic empire. Rome needed stability desperately, but stability isn't cultivated by kindness and generosity alone. Augustus understood that people will not obey merely out of gratitude or admiration. No, they must fear consequences while clearly seeing their own self-interest served. And with measured ruthlessness, Augustus systematically crushed opposition through publicly executing enemies of the state, not because he was cruel, but to instill unwavering respect through fear. Simultaneously, though, Augustus invested heavily in public works. He distributed grain, he constructed roads, and he improved the life of ordinary Romans. His intent wasn't mere charity in these acts. It was calculated appeal to self-interest. People who had something to gain, who felt secure, became loyal subjects. This is reminiscent of what we're seeing in America, where the government is talking about slashing so-called fraud and giving citizens free money. Nothing has changed in thousands of years. Augustus built an empire that lasted centuries because he understood this intricate balance between generosity and severity. So let's break this down in 3 little takeaways, mini lessons. Lesson 1 is fear creates stability. At the Mongolian steppes in the early 1200s, tribes warred constantly and chaos ruled the land. Until one leader, and you know his name, he changed it all. Genghis Khan. His enemies knew the stories. They would spread the word of cities that were wiped out, entire armies that vanished overnight. But Khan's fear served a clear purpose. He deliberately would spare a handful of survivors, and he let them flee to spread tales of all the horror and devastation that he had caused. This is because fear moves much faster than his armies would. Cities would surrender before the Mongols even arrived. They were terrified by their reputation alone. Imagine conquering through reputation instead of by bow and arrow. And through strategic terror, Khan united warring tribes and built the largest contiguous empire history has ever seen. Fear became his greatest weapon, turning violence into social stability. Lesson 2 is that self-interest drives loyalty. In Japan, during the 1600s, Oda Nobunaga faced endless civil war. He ultimately was regarded as the first great unifier of Japan, but it was not a pretty sight to get there. He did brutal public executions, and he stopped traitors cold. But he understood that fear alone would breed rebellion and another revolution, potentially even a threat to his life, like Julius Caesar. So he rewarded loyal followers with land, wealth, and title. His men would stay loyal because betrayal meant losing everything, but loyalty, well, that meant personal gain. He unified Japan not by virtue, but by carefully aligning obedience with self-interest. Lesson 3, balance your fear with benevolence. Prussia's Frederick the Great had a vision of prosperity and order, but Prussian nobles resisted change. So Frederick responded hard. He severely punished all disobedience. And the nobles, they learned fast. Opposition would be dangerous to them. So Frederick built farms, courts, and schools. Soon the nobles realized their own fortunes depended on loyalty. They're like dogs. Frederick controlled a thriving nation through fear and incentive combined. So here's how this applies to you. You might think that in your modern life, as you're in your car, you're a far cry from these lessons, but you're not. Every single person around you, whether it be colleagues, rivals, or even friends, they're all operating on hidden subconscious motives. You need to recognize their fears and understand their desires, and you will predict their behavior towards you. When you control their motives, you will control their actions, and this increases your personal power. So let's recap the examples one more time. And if you're listening closely, you can grab a pen and paper or just follow along closely. Augustus, he built Rome on ruthless execution and calculated generosity. Genghis Khan united the largest empire by reputation alone. And Nobunaga unified Japan through calculated rewards and terrifying consequences. Then Frederick the Great secured loyalty through prosperity as well as swift punishment. Now tell me in the comments, do you think it's better to lead by 80% fear and 20% reward, or a different Pareto principle or formula? Leave a comment with your thoughts. Fear or interest? Which motivates you the most? Also, if this challenged how you see human nature, share this video with someone who needs it right now. Never forget, people will rarely act from virtue alone. When you master fear and self-interest, you'll hold power that others can only dream of. Here's dark rule of power number 3. You must guard your power with your life. Power is always contested and it's never secure. When you turn your back for 1 second, it's going to betray you. And history leaves no doubt about this. Leaders who relaxed their grip lost everything. In Rome, 44 BC, Julius Caesar ruled the greatest empire on the planet Earth. He was victorious, he was beloved, and he was unstoppable. Or that's what he thought. He ignored warnings. He lowered his guard. But the biggest mistake was he trusted friendship without caution. Caesar once walked confidently into the Roman Senate, and in moments his supposed friends surrounded him and knives flashed. Caesar was stabbed 23 times, and he fell dead right there on the marble. His empire, his glory, his life, it was all lost in an instant. And why? Because Caesar forgot power demands constant vigilance. Ask yourself, have you ever trusted too quickly only to suffer betrayal? Caesar's fate shows exactly why vigilance can never waver when you're pursuing power. Here's some key takeaways for you to apply. Lesson 1, power requires ruthless discipline. Ancient Sparta understood discipline. Spartans built an unbreakable system. They were ruthless. They had absolute control over their slave population. They were brave, and they conquered. But Sparta declared annual war on the Helots. These were their slave force. And this allowed swift elimination of potential rebels. Was it harsh? Of course, without question. But Sparta thrived for centuries precisely because their leaders understood that power survives through constant vigilance and ruthless discipline. There's no other question about it. So lesson 2 is weakness always invites rebellion. I often think about Russia in the early 1900s in this regard. Tsar Nicholas II believed kindness and gentle reforms would solidify his power. Instead, his perceived weakness inflamed revolution. Opponents sensed vulnerability and they struck. They brought his empire crashing down. Nicholas lost not only his throne, but his beloved family and his life. History consistently proves that weakness never earns gratitude. It only fuels rebellion. Maybe in a religious sense, this is different, but when we're dealing with bricks and mud in the real world, this is a law of power that you cannot break. Lesson 3 is trust sparingly, but control absolutely. In 1600s Japan, the warrior, Tokugawa Ieyasu, he seized power through cunning strategy. He trusted no ally. He also watched every rival closely. Ieyasu eliminated anyone who hinted at betrayal. Even his most loyal generals knew punishment would be swift and brutal. They carefully maintained his fear and his absolute vigilance. And Ieyasu used this to solidify his reign. His ruthless caution ensured his dynasty lasted 2.5 centuries. Leaders who guarded their power left stable legacies. Those who trusted carelessly almost always faced ruin. Remember this key insight from Napoleon. He once said, authority survives only by constant vigilance and strength. Weakness invites destruction. A modern way to put this is that the most competent man keeps power. Even at his empire's peak, Napoleon trusted so few people. He watched everyone closely and never allowed his vigilance to waver until his exile forced his hand. His temporary lapse ended his reign forever. Here's why this matters to you in your modern life today. The same ruthless truth will apply in business, relationships, and in your social circle. The moment you stop guarding what you've earned, threats will multiply. Complacency destroys fortunes, careers, and lives. Understand clearly that your power survives only if you protect it. I want you to pause and tell me honestly, have you ever lost something so valuable all because your guard slipped for just a second? Comment below and let's share what vigilance taught us. Also, if this lesson hit home for you, share this video immediately with someone who needs to be shook into action. Never forget, power does not rest. It demands jealousy, vigilance, and unyielding strength. So guard your power or risk losing everything. Even in the Old Testament, God said, I am a jealous God. The proof is all around us. So the choice is yours. Will you stay vigilant or become a cautionary tale? Here's dark rule of power number 4. You must rule through imagination. People never follow reality. They chase hallucinations of what they believe reality is. When you control their imaginations, you can control the world. This is why propaganda is so effective. Every leader who shaped history knew this secret. They knew that imagination conquers reality every single time. In 333 BC, Alexander the Great faced the vast Persian army. It was an empire unbeatable in numbers and wealth. His troops were exhausted, though, and heavily outnumbered. They hesitated at the gates of Issus, but Alexander didn't inspire them with a presentation of numbers or logic. No, he ignited their imagination. He pointed his sword towards Persia, and he described endless glory and riches and legendary status that would await every single soldier, not just him. Alexander's soldiers no longer saw just an enemy. They saw immortality for themselves. And fired by their own imaginations, they charged fearlessly into battle. They defeated the Persian giant against all odds. Imagination, Alexander proved, rules far better than reality. So here's lesson 1. Symbols create loyalty. One of my favorite examples is the eagle standard of the Roman legions. It wasn't merely decoration. It symbolized Rome's invincible spirit. Soldiers would fight to the death to protect these eagle standards. They were convinced their entire honor rested in these symbolic images. And when enemies captured Roman standards, entire legions risked everything, fighting relentlessly to retrieve them. Symbols became sacred because they captured the imagination. Whoever controls symbols controls hearts and minds of the citizens. And you might think that's ancient history, but it's not. Look at the fasci, a bundle of rods with an axe, symbolizing unity and authority in Rome, because you can still see it today carved into the walls beside the speaker's rostrum in the United States Capitol. And that's not a coincidence. That's power echoing through time. America didn't just inherit democracy, it inherited Rome's imagery to claim the same authority, because long after speeches are forgotten, these symbols will endure. And those who plant the right symbols rule without speaking a word. Even the Washington Monument isn't just a monument. It has nothing to do with Washington. It's an obelisk lifted straight from ancient Egypt. Long before democracy was born in Athens around 500 BCE, obelisks symbolized divine authority, resurrection, and the link between heaven and earth. This wasn't a random design. It's a coded message in stone for the initiated. It's a reminder that power doesn't begin with the people. It begins with symbol, myth, and legacy. Because power isn't new. It's ancient, it's symbolic, and it's always intentional. Lesson 2, master communication to master people. Winston Churchill, Britain's wartime prime minister, he understood that imagination was so much more powerful than reality. In Britain's darkest hour, 1940, bombs were raining down nightly on London. Churchill never promised ease or comfort. Instead, he used words to shape imagination. He spoke boldly of victory against impossible odds. His vivid language transformed fear into courage. When Churchill proclaimed, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall never surrender," the British saw themselves as heroic warriors in a lineage of other heroes, not battered victims. Through language alone, Churchill turned despair into defiance. Lesson 3 is spectacle and pageantry dominate minds. Napoleon himself knew spectacle better than anyone. He crowned himself empire. Not quietly, but in an extravagant and orchestrated ceremony at the Notre Dame. With golden crowns, velvet robes, and towering cathedrals, Napoleon crafted a vision that made him look way larger than life. And the French people ate it right up. They were captivated by spectacle. They saw not just a ruler, but almost a demigod-like figure who was destined to rule over them. Napoleon knew exactly what he was doing. Imagination driven by spectacle secures power far more effectively than brute force alone would. And Napoleon summarized this perfectly. He said, imagination rules the world. Think about that. Reality alone never inspires armies, nations, or generations of people. Dreams did. Symbols, language, spectacle. These shape imagination. And imagination is reality itself. They're inseparable. So here's why imagination is so important in your life, in business, politics, or everyday life around us, even in this modern age. When you control imagination, it determines your personal success because people follow stories, visions, and dreams, not dry logic or facts. Steve Jobs was a recent master of this. He called the computer a bicycle for your mind. He used metaphor to describe an otherwise complex or technical item. He also said the iPod, he said, was 1,000 songs in your pocket. He didn't talk about the technical specifications of the hardware. So if you master the ability to inspire imagination, others are going to follow you wherever you lead. If you fail to inspire their imagination, your influence, it'll vanish instantly. So let's recap these anecdotes. Alexander the Great, he used dreams of immortality to defeat Persia's superior wealth and numbers. The Roman eagles symbolized honor, inspiring legions to fight fiercely to the death. And Winston Churchill turned fear into bravery with carefully chosen words. Napoleon's coronation was also an example where he captured the French people's imaginations through spectacular ceremony. So tell me below, what vision or dream inspired you most powerfully in your life? I'm sure you can think back to something where the theater of it or something inspired you to action. Share your story on how imagination changed your reality. And never underestimate imagination's power because whoever shapes dreams controls reality. Will you lead through dry facts in your modern life, or will you master imagination to change your world? Here's dark rule of power number 5. Make discipline as consistent as breathing. Your greatest weapon as a leader is not strength, money, or powerful friends. It's relentless discipline. History reveals us clearly that disciplined effort conquers everything. In 218 BC, Hannibal stood before the towering Alps. Rome was his mortal enemy, and they waited comfortably for him beyond these impossible soaring mountains. They were certain that no army would dare to cross. It was foolish. But Hannibal does something unimaginable. He pushes relentlessly forward over the Alps. Through freezing winds, sheer cliffs, hunger, and despair, Hannibal led thousands of men and elephants across mountains previously thought impossible to cross. His discipline was ruthless. His focus was absolute. He arrived in Italy, and Hannibal defeated Roman legions, terrifying Rome to its core. His secret was his unmatched discipline and his relentless focus. He was willing to outwork every obstacle that was put in his way, and he didn't see anything as fate. He saw obstacles as opportunities. So let's break this down in lesson number 1. Mental discipline is your greatest weapon. Sun Tzu, the legendary Chinese strategist, he said that every battle is won or lost before it's ever fought. Victory begins in the mind. Alexander the Great understood this. He did war games. He studied philosophy and geography. He organized his thoughts meticulously before each campaign. Alexander conquered the known world not because he had the largest army, but because his disciplined mind allowed him to sustain immense workloads under crushing pressure. Clear mental organization lets you see clearly when others panic. It'll ensure victory through your own superior focus. And lesson number 2 is master one task at a time. The legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi taught absolute concentration. He said, "Do nothing useless." Musashi fought over 60 duels without losing a single one. This was because his entire attention stayed locked fiercely on one opponent at a time. His secret wasn't raw talent, it was ruthless discipline. Musashi trained daily. He focused only on mastering his sword, and he removed all distractions from his life. His approach was simple and deadly. Master one task fully, then move deliberately to the next. Focused effort crushes scattered energy every single time. So lesson number 3 is that strategic rest will preserve your power. Julius Caesar understood that life had a certain rhythm. Similar to circadian rhythms, Caesar would endure incredible burdens. He would lead armies, govern provinces, wrote memoirs, but then he would rest strategically. After intense campaigns, Caesar would withdraw. He'd recalibrate his thoughts, and he'd return refreshed and sharper than ever. Unlike his weaker rivals who burned out quickly, Caesar sustained his immense workload for decades because he understood that rest is not weakness if it's done strategically. It's the foundation of relentless and consistent power. Think of it like a river. Rest will become fierce when it's done like battle. Emperor Marcus Aurelius, he understood this perfectly. He led Rome through wars, plagues, constant political challenges, but Marcus Aurelius maintained his extraordinary mental discipline throughout it all. Each night, he meticulously reflected in his private journal, reviewing the day's success, shortcomings, and lessons he learned. His disciplined nightly ritual sharpened his ultimate judgment and allowed him to rule effectively through endless crises that would break a lesser man. Aurelius proved that true discipline isn't just occasional and whimsical. No, it must become as consistent and natural as breathing itself. Napoleon himself summarized this as well. He said, "Victory belongs to the most persevering." Think again of the metaphor of a river. Relentless work, disciplined strategic focus is the singular trait in all the victorious leaders, because greatness does not just emerge from random chaos. It's organized and disciplined minds that conquer. So as you hear this message, I don't want you to forget your goals, whether they be financial, professional, or personal, they depend on your ability to sustain disciplined effort over long periods of time. When you're doing a bunch of different tasks, or God forbid, saying yes to a lot of people, it scatters your power, and indecision wastes your potent energy, your life force. Success demands ruthless prioritization. You must tackle one challenge at a time, work relentlessly, organize clearly, and then rest deliberately. Master these habits, and you will become an unstoppable force. So let's do a quick recap. Hannibal crossed the Alps through relentless focus, and he stunned Rome with his discipline. Alexander the Great conquered with mental preparation before every battle. And Miyamoto Musashi, he won duels by mastering one clear task at a time. Julius Caesar managed vast responsibilities through strategic rest and mental clarity. So tell me honestly, what's one task you will ruthlessly prioritize starting right now? Comment your commitment in writing below. And if this clarified your next steps, share this video with someone in your life who's distracted and scatterbrained and who needs clearer focus, because history's most powerful figures prove this one rule absolutely true. So decide clearly today, will you scatter your efforts or master disciplined, focused work to conquer every obstacle like crossing your personal Alps? Here's dark rule of power number 6. Judge people by utility. Everyone knows people aren't equal. They never were, they never will be. History shows that in power plays, people are valuable only by what they can do for you or their utility. Genghis Khan knew this secret. He evaluated every man ruthlessly, and it was never by birth, family, or nepotism, but solely by their utility. Khan promoted warriors who delivered victories and discarded those without hesitation who failed. His generals rose from humble beginnings because they proved useful, effective, and lethal. Khan didn't waste power on loyalty just for loyalty's sake. Oh no, he saw people clearly as tools, using them where they fit best. And with this clarity, he conquered half the world. Many modern CEOs could learn from this. In modern corporate America, so many people get promoted in an undeserving manner. It should be strictly through utility value and through a meritocracy alone. So lesson 1 is power demands ruthless evaluation. And ancient Rome, like always, has a crystal clear example of this. Marcus Licinius Crassus was Rome's richest man, much richer than Elon Musk is. But he built his power by understanding human utility better than anyone. You see, Crassus funded Caesar's political rise. He backed him, not from friendship. In fact, he hated the guy, but from pure calculation. Caesar was useful. He was ambitious and he was capable. And when Spartacus's rebellion erupted, Crassus raised a private army. He promoted ruthless commanders who got results, and he discarded those who hesitated or failed. Power thrives when you evaluate unemotionally and strategically. Lesson 2 is loyalty is conditional on performance. Japan's feudal shoguns chose their inner circles exclusively on usefulness, and samurais rose swiftly by skill, competence, and victories in battle, not hereditary lineage. But the moment samurais failed or they were betrayed by weakness, they became liabilities, and the shoguns discarded them without any remorse. They recognized that power is sustained by capability alone. Loyalty without utility is not only meaningless, it is dangerous. So lesson number 3 is position people strategically, not emotionally. Napoleon Bonaparte exemplified this rule. He placed generals choosing strictly based on their battlefield effectiveness. One example was Marshal Ney. That man arose because he delivered clear victories, not because Napoleon liked him. But the instant his generals faltered, Napoleon reassigned or replaced them immediately. He understood emotion never secures empires. Only ruthless strategic utility does. Another master of this principle was Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor who unified Germany. Bismarck selected political allies purely for their immediate usefulness, and he skillfully formed alliances when beneficial, but then he would discard those alliances ruthlessly whenever their utility expired. Sentiment meant nothing to him. Practicality meant everything. Through relentless pragmatism, Bismarck shaped fragmented German states into one powerful empire. And Machiavelli warned clearly that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. What he meant by that was that appearances, friendships, and sentiment always cloud your judgment. True power demands that you judge solely by results. You need to start seeing people as tools and position them where they best serve your goals. Discard immediately wherever the usefulness of people fades. In business, relationships, and life itself, this principle holds brutally true. Sentimental loyalty to friends or employees who deliver nothing will ultimately destroy you and whatever organization you're a leader of. So you need to evaluate clearly, unemotionally, and pragmatically who's useful and not just show affection. How else can you positively impact the world if the organization that you lead fails? It's not only just selfish, it's pragmatic. So let's quickly recap everything we've learned here. Genghis Khan built an empire by ruthless meritocracy, and he promoted only the useful. Crassus funded Caesar and raised armies not because he liked him, but through strategic usefulness. And Japan's shoguns chose samurai by utility. They discarded them as liabilities immediately when the utility faded. Napoleon selected generals strictly on battlefield results alone, and he removed them almost instantly if needed. So judge people by their utility value in power positions, and then position them strategically and discard without hesitation when their usefulness fades, because power demands clarity, not sentiment. Choose wisely. Utility builds empires. Sentiment and affection is weak and destroys them. You've just learned the first 6 dark rules of power out of 50. These are the same strategies wielded by legendary conquerors, feared leaders, and iconic visionaries throughout history. Right now, you clearly understand that destiny favors bold action, never hesitation, that people are driven by fear and self-interest, and that you should guard your power vigilantly or lose it instantly. You learn to capture imaginations, and you'll rule realities. To be disciplined no matter what and make it as consistent as breathing. To judge people purely by usefulness, and that sentiment weakens empires. Great men like Caesar, Napoleon, Alexander, and Genghis Khan, they all knew these truths. They reshaped the world through brutal clarity, relentless ambition, and calculated ruthlessness. But these first 6 rules barely scratch the surface. If you're truly a serious operator about mastering power, you must know all 50 dark rules, each battle tested by history's greatest rulers and proven by modern titans. So don't stop here. Click the next video to access the full arsenal. You can't afford to be ignorant in today's age. Ignorance equals death. Only knowledge will empower you into action. So in the comments below, I want to know which of the first 6 rules shook your beliefs the most. Which will you immediately apply to your life starting right now? And then share this video with friends who are ambitious enough to handle the truths of dark power. And I'll see you in the next installment. Oh wait, I almost forgot. I promised to tell you the story of Rome's richest private citizen and his horrible death. So let me tell you what happened to Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, a man much richer than Elon Musk. If Caesar led armies and Cicero shaped laws, Crassus controlled the money. He was Rome's J.P. Morgan, not just counting gold, but using chaos to multiply it. He wasn't born powerful, though. He fought his way up by tooth and nail. And when Rome caught fire, Crassus didn't panic. He bought the ruins, rebuilt them, and sold the comeback. A great capitalist. When civil war left dead men and empty homes, he claimed their land for cheap. Misery, though, fed his empire. But greed doesn't stop. He wanted glory. He was jealous of Caesar, so he marched east into the Parthian desert, and he ignored every voice that told him to turn back. There, he lost everything. His army, his son, and his life. But the Parthians didn't just kill him. No, they melted gold and poured it down his throat. Not for revenge, but for meaning. He lived for gold, so he died by it. Some say he was dead before the hot molten gold hit his thorax. Others say he felt every drop sear through him. Either way, the lesson stays the same. When you worship gold as your god, gold will bury you. Money without vision doesn't lead, it poisons. Power isn't what you own, it's the ideals you hold. Crassus had everything except wisdom. And in Rome, like our modern lives today, that mistake kills.